Whether it's about God of War Ragnarok story, or its graphics, or it's about Kratos' dialogues, or whether it's about Kratos' heavy pounding. Oops, my bad. I guess that wasn't God of War 1, 2, 3, so we should leave it for another day. Hi, this is Sayer of Nabi, and today we are set to sail on a voyage that no one has ever did. A voyage to such uncharted grounds even organizations like IGN have never did, or even discussed them fully to this very day. Keeping it straight, we are going to review only those games that we have completed 100%. Because what I feel about previous system is that it's kind of unfair to the game that you just rated it without having an urge to complete it fully. It is just like passing a judgment on someone without even listening his argument completely. Not fair, not fair. You don't know that apart from conventional topics like story, gameplay, or graphics of a game, might have some other aspects that makes a game good/unique. For instance, side quest, free roam sandbox environment after 100% completing the game, or any Easter egg, or any trophy, or any boss battle, or any hidden area, or any subliminal message, or any conspiracy related to the game that is connected with us in this real world. That may makes the game outstanding/unique, and the list goes on. So don't worry, we will give them a proper chance, we will listen to them completely, we will 100% complete the game, and then we will review it. And our review score will be subdivided into two subtopics of the review, which are number 1, conventional topics like story, gameplay, graphics, etc., usually on which everyone reviews the game and rates them, and number 2 is unconventional topics, which everyone skips and leaves the game stranded, unheard, in the middle of nowhere. That if someone would have played those unheard parts of the game, so it might be possible that it would make the game outstanding. Other parts I already told you, like side quest, free roam sandbox environment, etc. We will combine the review score of both topics, and the total aggregate we get from combining the scores of both topics will be the final score of the reviewed game. So enough of our chit chat and let's begin the action. You are watching my review of God of War Ragnarok after I got its platinum, so let's get it started. God of War Ragnarok is produced by Santa Monica Studio, which is an American video game developer and currently and from a very long time is funded by Sony Interactive Entertainment. And as we all know that Kratos always defies death, something similar happened with this studio too. Technically, the last God of War game that this studio has created was God of War Ascension in 2013. And after that, this studio was slowly and gradually drifted towards the state of anonymity, without leaving a clue that whether the next God of War game will come or not. Fans were determined back then that Kratos will be back again, because the ending of God of War 3 was a cliffhanger. That is why fans had some slight hope, but later on that hope also fades away by the time. But suddenly this studio made its comeback like Kratos, or you can say like Undertaker. In 2016's E3 event, they showcased a new God of War game that we all know by the name God of War 2018. Behind the major success of that showcase, there was a man named Cory Barlog, who already contributed as a back-end developer/employee in making of previous God of War games, is now the project head of this new God of War game. Turns out to be he was the messiah of this new IP and studio. He revived the studio, and by blowing a new soul in this project, he revamped it and introduced new techniques, and from the scratch he rebranded the whole franchise and turned God of War into a brand new style game. They also preserved its originality by declaring the new game as a continuation of the previous games. Same goes with God of War Ragnarok, that it is the sequel of God of War 2018, but this time this project is led by Eric Williams, because it's a kind of traditional thing in Santa Monica Studio that project director/head has to pass the torch to a new guy to lead the new project. This time, this project's grandeur was even bigger than God of War 2018, and on an even bigger scale, the things were executed on an even greater level. And in parallel, this project also faced many difficulties, like lead voice actor of Kratos, Christopher Judge, had faced an injury and had a medical procedure of his back, his knees, got both his replaced, and then he rejoined the team. This project also suffered because of the 2019 pandemic of Corona, but somehow this project was completed despite being suffered by some difficulties and delays.
Inaction is also a risk. You taught me that. Stop thinking like a father for a moment and start thinking like a general.
No!
God of War Ragnarok story is based on the events after Fimbulwinter struck Midgard, and in Norse mythology that will ultimately lead to the War of all wars, where all gods, all realms will fight with each other to the very end of everything, which is called Ragnarok. In the beginning of this story, we witness Kratos is sitting and seems worried about something, and Fimbulwinter is on its feet. Looks like he knows about something but don't want to be bothered by discussing it. He is living a regular life like an ordinary man with his son. We also see some progression of his son Atreus, that he is now a grown-up kid. He gained some height and he is now a teenager full of curiosity, which is as usual like every other teenager who is driven by excitement, curiosity, anticipation, and turns out to be he was on some expeditions on something only he knows about secretly, of which Kratos is unaware of. Because Atreus believes in his mother's teachings that after Fimbulwinter, when Ragnarok comes, he and Kratos should be prepared and be ready for that. But on the other hand, Kratos, with his very own don't care nature / attitude, he believes being low-key is the way forward. But the fact is, the horrible deeds this father and son had done in God of War 2018, being just low-key is not enough. They have to do something more than that, because they pick a fight with the gods of Asgard. Now they are on the hunt for Kratos and Atreus. The story gets extremely engaging from the initial minutes, that you will be glued to your seat in curiosity that what will gonna happen next, and believe me, you won't be able to find any excuses to leave your place. The story unfolds in a very dynamic way. You will be seeing Thor, Odin, and you will be seeing Atreus misbehaves with his father like a spoiled brat. Okay, wait here. This is something personal between you and I. Come here. I swear to the god, if Atreus was my son, I would smack his ass to the moon and back. Bloody Loki from a dollar store. They also go on a mission to find Norse god of war Tyr. And time to time the story will give you such twists and turns that will entertain you to the limits. So I am not going to tell you any further about story because I don't want to spoil the experience of those who haven't played God of War Ragnarok yet. Overall, the story is very engaging and really good, especially the main theme of the story, which is about the relationship of father and son, was so well executed that sometimes I had tears in my eyes. Amazing. If we talk about character design, then yes, this game has been given a bit of a happy fairy tale fantasy touch. Unlike the old God of War games where the character designs in Greek mythology was very hard-hitting and dark. So yes, the character design in this game matched the new theme. For example, no matter which character you look at, you'll find a fun personality, a happy vibe, and even a bit of melodrama. Even Kratos, whose facial structure and overall appearance still retain that hard-hitting, dark look for obvious reasons, as this is a continuation of the older games still. Despite that, Kratos is shown as much more calm and soft-hearted in this game. In many scenes you'll see him in a lighter mood. Then there's Atreus. He's a total prankster, a mischievous kind of kid who never stops throwing tantrums. Besides him, there's Thor, Odin, Brock, Sindri, Lunda, Freya, Freya's brother, and my personal favorite, Sif. Oh god, just let me meet Owens. All of their character designs are super jolly. And one of my absolute favorites, Ratatoskr the Squirrel, such a fun and cute character. If we talk about the script and dialogues, they were compiled by several writers together. However, here I will mention only the lead writer to represent the entire writing team, and his name is Richard Zingrande Gabert. After experiencing the script and dialogues of this game, it really feels like the depth of thought that writers have is incredible. You might even find yourself wondering what must have happened in their lives that enabled them to write something so powerful on paper. You might get emotional just thinking about it. Such emotional depth in dialogues, just wow. And then if we talk about those who truly brought life to these dialogues in the script, the actors who perform them, they are literally masters of their craft. They immerse themselves completely into the characters and emotions to bring this script to life. Actors like Christopher Judge dove so deep into the character of Kratos that, according to interviews, he was sometimes even seen crying after shoots. Having felt the emotional intensity of the character, especially the fatherly aspect of Kratos, Christopher Judge also featured in one of my favorite childhood shows, Stargate. Then there are so many other actors who delivered phenomenal performances in this project. Just wow. A kid like Sunny Suljic playing the role of his son with such depth at such a young age is literally a phenomenal thing. Danielle Basudi, who played Freya, is one of my favorites too. She even played a horror role in the movie Insidious. And a very special mention goes to Troy Baker, who voiced Ratatoskr. Just wow. It's always so much fun listening to Ratatoskr's lines. And besides them, the entire cast just did an outstanding job with their acting. Simply wow. Last but not the least, speaking of direction, Eric Williams as the main director of the game did a phenomenal job of placing everything in its most suitable and desired place, which added immense value and brilliance to the game. Speaking of music, the soundtrack of this game has also been composed on a very grand scale. The theme of the game is based on Norse mythology, and to match that, instruments and even entire orchestras have been used that reflect the Norse Viking style of music. Some of my personal favorites include Blood Upon the Snow, Rabe's Lament, Faye's Song, and my absolute favorite, Atreus' theme. All the credit goes to Bear McCreary, who composed all this music, and an interesting fact is that his character is also featured in the game. And he's shown as a music composer in it, which is just lovely.
Wait, Skull and Hati are in Vanaheim?
We learned the giants rescued them from Odin and brought them here.
The gameplay of God of War Ragnarok is pretty much the same as the previous one, God of War 2018, and for obvious reasons. Game development has become quite detailed and complex now. Each character, each level has entire teams working on them. So it's no joke to expect a completely new game engine with every release, like in the older generations. Besides, the game is a direct continuation of God of War 2018, so expecting something completely new from God of War Ragnarok doesn't really make sense. I'm saying this because before the game's release, I saw this kind of excitement among some gamers, as if they expected a game built entirely from ground zero. To those gamers, I have this message. Bruh, relax a little. At home, no one serves you food and you play it a second time. Buddy, you are not a VIP. You're barely on the guest list. But here they want a full sequel built from scratch in 2022? Bruh, I hope you get well soon. Still, Santa Monica Studio did a great job by adding plenty of new elements and features to the gameplay, which we'll talk about as we go forward. Talking about the camera angle, the behind the shoulder third person unlock camera is back using the same cinematography technique that were used in God of War 2018, where the entire game is filmed in one continuous shot from beginning to end. Absolutely uncut. In my personal opinion, this is a next level feature that I haven't seen in any other video game. There are one or two places where the scene changes, but I won't reveal where exactly, otherwise it would spoil the fun. Speaking of combat, this time it's been made faster paced and more engaging. New moves and techniques have been introduced in my personal opinion. Since I completed the game 100% on Give Me God of War difficulty, no, I'm not flexing. Just a little bit. The combat has become really diverse and fun. Honestly, whether it's a tough enemy or waves of enemies, the thrill of fighting them and connecting combos is just next level. For me, it's one of the finest hack and slash games of the current generation. It's similar to God of War 2018 but with some new features like the weapon power-up system and airborne attacks which weren't in the 2018 version. You also get a good variety of weapons just like in God of War 2018 where you had the Leviathan Axe and Blaze of Chaos. In this game, you get both of those weapons right from the start. As the game progresses, you also get a new weapon, a spear. This time, each weapon has a new feature called a weapon power-up. For example, if you're using the Leviathan Axe and hold down the triangle button, it charges up with frost. Similarly, the Blaze of Chaos charge up with flames and pressing the triangle with the spear unleashes a wind blast. Apart from that, if you look at secondary weapons, there's a lot of variety there too, like different weapon attachments, each with its own unique ability. The same goes for Atreus and later on Freya. Their magical attacks also have a lot of variety. Plus this time, Spartan Rage also comes in different styles, and my personal favorite among them was Wrath. Upgrading and customization also play a very crucial role in your progress through the game, especially if you're playing on the hardest difficulty like me. No, I'm not flexing. More specifically, if you're heading into a special boss fight or going on a side quest, it's essential that your armor and weapons are properly upgraded and customized, otherwise you're going to have a tough time. That said, the upgrading and customization system is more or less the same as it was in God of War 2018. One major issue people had with God of War 2018, and I had it too, was the lack of variety in enemy types. In 2018, they often recycled trolls as boss fights. But in God of War Ragnarok, we see a good amount of variety in both enemy types and boss fights, which is a huge plus for the game, especially the boss fights that happen during the story. They show a lot of variety both in terms of enemies and bosses. Each realm features different types of enemies. That said, I do have a small complaint. There were some boss fights outside the main story that, if included in the main storyline, would have made things even more exciting. But by not including them, it becomes clear that maybe those fights weren't fully developed or the devs didn't have a solid idea of what to do with them, so they were left as an optional or additional content, rather than being part of the main narrative. And other criticism I have is related to the scale of boss fights. Older God of War games, whether it was part 1, 2 or 3, always had massive, grand, larger than life boss battles. That sense of epic scale was somewhat missing in God of War Ragnarok. When it comes to puzzles, I'd say that in the current generation of games, I don't know why, but puzzles don't feel very complex or mind-bending anymore. Back in the PS1 and PS2 era, puzzles genuinely required brainstorming. There were times when you would have to open that old dial-up internet just to check a walkthrough because you had no idea how to solve a particular puzzle or what to do next. Even games like GTA even aren't puzzle focused had moments back then where you would need to look things up online. Series like the original Silent Hill and Tomb Raider had those kinds of challenges too, and the list goes on. So, as for puzzles in the game, they are more like a walk in the park, nothing too difficult or challenging. The world and level design is quite interactive. In every world and level there's plenty to do. You can follow the main story objective marker on the map to progress the storyline, or if you want, you can go off on a completely different expedition like taking on a side quest or exploring a new area. You'll also come across shops in different places throughout the world where you can upgrade your stats. And as you move through various locations, you'll frequently encounter enemies you can either take a beating or dish one out. Overall, the world and level design is quite decent. Talking about traversal in this game, it's kind of open world but not completely. Even if you are free roaming, you can only visit limited areas, not the entire world. And with a game that primarily belongs to the action-adventure genre, you naturally expect some level of linearity, which I personally really like. You go from one level to another and each level or realm feels entirely new, which constantly gives you a sense of freshness throughout the game. Most of the traversal is done on foot. In some areas you'll get a dog sled and in watery regions you'll travel by boat. For long distances there's also a fast travel option. During traversal, there are some really entertaining dialogues between the characters, and I'm putting them under unconventional topics because many of these conversations only happen after finishing the main story. And let's be honest, most people don't complete 100% of the game, so these dialogues end up being a hidden gem for those who stick around.
Wow, it's beautiful. And, wet.
It is also dangerous.
If you talk about graphics of the world and level design, what an absolutely beautiful job they've done designing the different levels and worlds in the game. A lot of the credit goes to current generation of graphics technology. We are now seeing such incredible graphical fidelity in video games that it feels like the day isn't far when we'll start seeing truly photorealistic graphics in games. Coming back to the point, every realm and every level is designed so beautifully that sometimes you'll just want to stop and stand in one spot admiring the scenery, not even feeling like moving forward. My personal favorite realm in God of War Ragnarok, and one I actually have complained about, is Asgard. The level of photorealism was so intense, I was honestly blown away. I just wish the developers had made that realm revisitable. As for the graphics of characters, they are also really well done. One common issue with character graphics usually comes during facial animations. because sometimes they can look a bit odd or cartoonish or unrealistic. But that problem has largely been resolved in this generation, especially in terms of facial animation. And in this game, you don't really see that issue at all. So overall, the character graphics are also quite impressive. When it comes to photorealistic graphics, the video game industry is still a bit behind, but things have definitely started to improve significantly. Specifically in this game, the place where I felt the highest level of photorealism in the graphics and where the visuals blended so beautifully with the environment that it became hard to tell whether I was looking at a game or reality was Asgard. For me, Asgard was the most visually appealing world in the entire game.
That's it precisely.
Hey! Not so fast. How'd that get in here?
The development of God of War Ragnarok took around 5 years. Part of the delay was due to Christopher Judge's medical condition and of course the COVID pandemic. But after a 5-year gap, the game was finally completed. As for the engine, it was developed on Santa Monica Studios' own proprietary engine which currently isn't publicly available. At the time I'm reviewing this game, it's very well optimized. Even when it launched, there weren't any major optimization issues, everything worked smoothly. There was just a minor issue experienced by some gamers playing on PS4 where the game would occasionally crash, but that too was resolved shortly after launch. Overall, the problems were small and ignorable, and over time the game became perfectly optimized. In addition, a free DLC has now been added to the game called God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, but we'll talk about that some other time. Speaking of development beyond the technical side, credit goes to everyone involved from coders, programmers, and design to actors, musicians, artists, and even the spot boys. But for me, a very important team that played a crucial role in giving the game its authentic Norse mythological essence was the group of scholars, professors of Norse literature, text, and history, who proofread the entire project and helped make it Norse accurate. These experts came from some of the world's top universities.
You'll get your answers soon enough. Well, some of them.
Now coming to the main point, was this game worth it or not? I would definitely say yes, it was absolutely worth it and you should definitely play it. But there are a few things that, if handled differently, could have elevated it even more. If those elements had been there, it would have been on another level. For example, the story started off very engaging and deep, but as it progressed, it started to feel a bit rushed. However, this rushed pacing can be understood when you realize that the game was already delayed by 2 years due to Christopher Judge's injury and the COVID pandemic. The developers likely didn't want to stretch the Norse saga into a third game, because if they had, they'd have ended up spending 15 years on just one saga, which wouldn't have been very efficient or practical from a time and production perspective. Still, there's a little regret in my heart. I feel like, just like the older God of War games, Ragnarok should have been split into a third part. That way, Odin's grandeur and the final boss fights could have been even more epic and on a grander scale. And similarly, another letdown was Thor. After the hype they built around him back in 2018, Thor didn't quite live up to that level in this game. Other than that, if you ask me personally, this game is incredibly special to me. As a God of War fanboy, I'd give it a full rating, especially the way the father and son relationship is portrayed. It was extremely heartwarming and emotional. For me, that bond was one of the most powerful elements of the entire experience. But as a video game critic, or from the perspective of someone who is new to this franchise, I wouldn't give it a full rating. That's because there were some flaws and issues, mostly due to the rushed pacing and the lack of truly grand boss battles. So I would give it 8.5 out of 10. Now let's quickly talk about some unconventional topics which will make this review truly unique, something no one has likely done before, meaning reviewing the game after completing it 100%. After completing the game 100%, if you free roam in the game's open world sandbox environment, there's honestly isn't much left that's particularly special or interactive. At most you can revisit places like Niflheim or Helheim to replay certain challenges. Other than that, if you just enjoy walking around a lot, then sure, keep exploring. But there is one really interesting thing which I mentioned earlier and falls under unconventional topics, and that's the dialogues between the characters while free roaming after the main story is complete. Through those dialogues, you can learn a lot of things, many of which are still being speculated on within the God of War community. Yes, you'll come across some really fun side quests along the way as you progress toward 100% completion of the game. It gives off an RPG-like element where you have missions to complete for different characters. And in these you'll also find quite a few collectible items which will be very helpful in the additional boss battles. Without those items, those extra boss fights can be absolute hell, so it's better to collect them beforehand. Yes, there is a hidden area in God of War Ragnarok, and when you reach it, you feel like, wow, this is an entirely separate world of its own. And there you'll get to do various tasks and a lot of other things, which was a big wow moment for me. Yes, apart from all God of War Ragnarok story and other elements, one of the most significantly highlighted things is the additional boss fights and boss battles. And if you consider yourself a hardcore gamer or a true big shot, then try completing the Helheim challenges on Give Me God of War difficulty, or defeat all the berserkers or take down that wicked nasty Gna. Then I'll respect you. And right there, I'm intentionally dropping a bomb that will definitely set Elden Ring fanboys on fire. Yes, these boss battles on Give Me God of War difficulty are way harder than anything in Elden Ring or any other Souls-like game. Believe me, Melania looks like a milk-drinking baby in front of Gna. And if you want to see my grind that what it actually takes to beat that bastard Berserker King and nasty Gna, I'll drop a link up here in the I button. Also, why is it even called the I button? Tell me in the comments. If you talk about trophies, yes, they are fun and can be achieved on any difficulty, but if you really want to savor the challenge of this game, then play it on the hardest difficulty. Only then after beating Gna, when that platinum trophy pops up on your screen and you hear that satisfying trophy sound, only then after defeating Gna, when that platinum trophy pops up on your screen and you hear that satisfying trophy sound, the dopamine rush you will feel will be absolutely euphoric. Okay, I'm flexing a little. Yes, how can Easter eggs be left out of any game, especially if you're hustling for the librarian trophy in this one? You will find books, and on those books you'll see characters from other games along with poetic text related to them, which is quite enjoyable to discover. For example, one of the books even features Ratchet and Clank. Apart from that, in the crater area of Vanaheim there is a frozen lightning bolt, but I won't spoil the story behind it. And yes, there are even more Easter eggs. Trust me, they'll lead you to a whole new world. The Ratchet and Clank book, the frozen lightning bolt in Vanaheim, these are just a few examples. Yes, there are secret and hidden messages related to the Easter eggs, but I won't discuss them in detail, so I don't spoil your experience, like who blew the horn, the secret behind the lightning bolt in Vanaheim, and the mystery behind Loki's mask, etc. But beyond all that, there is an even more conspirational question that comes to my mind regarding this franchise, and surely it must come to others' mind too. They started this series with Greek mythology where Kratos slayed every god. Then he moved on to Norse mythology and did the same. Now we know Kratos is going to head into Egyptian mythology where he'll likely to do the same again. But the question is If this pattern continues, will this franchise eventually start touching upon currently existing religions in this world? And that question haunts me, considering the potential devastating consequences. Yes, completing this game is definitely a fun experience, and as a trophy collector, earning its platinum trophy holds great value for me. But one complaint I do have is that Kratos' stats only get maxed out when the only thing left in the game is to defeat Ghana. They should have at least included a sufficient portion of the game where we could enjoy using Kratos' fully maxed out abilities. What's the point if after maxing everything out, all you're left with is one fight against Ghana? What are we supposed to do with those abilities after that? Frame them or something? So after 100% completing the game, I will rate it 7 out of 10. That's all folks, and if you like this video, so don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and follow me on Instagram, Facebook and on other social media platforms. You can find all the links in the description, and I'll catch you next time.